Oddworld Soulstorm is a reimagining of a much older platform puzzle game, Abe's Exoddus, a game released in 1998. Abe is a Mudokon. Think of them as spiritual worker ants who have been enslaved by a race known as the Gluckons, forced to work as slaves in Gluckon factories, all for their master's pursuit of delicious moolah. The working conditions as a whole were less than desirable, even for 1998, dystopian at best. Oddworld Inhabitants meant to make a pentalogy of these games, each following a new character exploring very dark and strange worlds, fighting back against the exploitation of big corporations, and freeing different races of worker people from horrid fates. Soulstorm's come in and changed the timeline of the previous two games of the pentalogy, making Munch's Odyssey non-canon and replacing Exoddus. It's been touted as what the developers wished Exoddus was. Now, during the previous game, Abe had become a bit of a messiah character, leading his people out of Rupture Farms, a meat processing factory, to their freedom, away from slavery, avoiding traps, guards, and various monstrous creatures, eventually unlocking a spiritual power known as the Shrikle to smite his foes. We'll touch on that briefly in this video, but if you want a deep dive on the old chronology before Soulstorm changed the canon, watch this video I've carded here. Soulstorm came out in 2021 and follows Abe directly after the events of Odyssey, as he and his people are on the run from their old boss, encountering all sorts of danger as they progress through. It features many characters from Exoddus, but uses them for different purposes. We even get a bit of expansion on the Mudokon origins. The game touches on some very dark themes, as you might be able to tell from this setup, but with some cinematic storytelling and changes to the overall game engine that set it apart from its predecessors. The purpose of this video is to explore the game's storyline, breaking it down into its key events and themes where appropriate, and believe me, this is one rabbit hole you won't want to miss. Expect spoilers from here and enjoy.
You got it, bud.
When we boot up the game, we get a recap of what actually happened in Odyssey, or its remaster New and Tasty, whichever you'd played first, but from the perspective of the corporations and their media machine. It's believed that Mullock had burnt down his own farm in an attempt to defraud investors and claim insurance money, leading to the death of the 300 Mudokons working there and the Sligs guarding them. There's conspiracy theories that the 300 Mudokons working there actually overthrew Mullock and escaped, but as is known in history, a Mudokon has never beaten a Gluckon at anything, so that can't be true, right? In actuality, the conspiracies are right. Abe had led his people to freedom and caused a supernatural lightning strike to demolish the farm. We cut to a cinematic of the Mudokons mid-escape, riding out on a giant suspended train, and things look bleak for them. Flying Sligs is shooting at the driver's carriage, and Alf, a Mudokon who was previously relegated to answering player emails, is a central character here, throwing their booze into the engine of the train to try and keep it going at speed. Looking ahead, there's a giant factory at the end of the line, and it's quite bleak with the enemies in front and behind of them. Alf starts banging on the door to the previous carriage to try and get Abe's attention, who's just sat there staring at some glowing artifact, muttering, "What do I do now?" It's revealed whatever situation they're stuck in is going to be left on a cliffhanger, as we cut before. A lone Mudokon in Rupture Farms uniform is running through the deserts of Mudos, seemingly having taken a stray bullet from a Slig guard at one point in time. He's carrying whatever artifact Abe will be obsessed with in the future, and he must want to deliver the thing by hand, even with the Sligs in pursuit. At this point in time, the rest of the Mudokons who'd escaped the farm have sheltered up in some sort of cave system, most of them paralytic from a load of Soulstorm brew drinking. The ones who are still up are sharing stories of the escape whilst chugging the brews. Abe is talking to a shaman who's trying to encourage him to cut off the stitches that are over his lips and to embrace his full voice. He's reluctant, as it's the only thing he's got that proves his mother was real. Yeah, she's being introduced now. She gave him those stitches, and if they're gone, his memory will be the only proof of her existence. He doesn't cut them despite encouragements from the shaman, who reveals Abe's work freeing his people isn't done, as gunfire rings off in the background and panicked Mudokons accidentally light the caves on fire. The shaman is crushed in the ensuing chaos, and then we finally get behind the wheels of Abe in this game. Now, I'm picking this game up after playing the old series of games. I skipped Getting New and Tasty as it's just a remaster of the first game basically. Immediately, there's a few gameplay changes here. In fact, a full revamp with us having this free dynamic movement instead of fixed responses to our inputs. A dynamic camera following us, replacing the screen by screen approach of the older titles. An actual aimable throwing system, alongside that an inventory and crafting system, plus a double jump to boot. Now they've worked really hard to upgrade Abe to bring him to modern platforming, especially with audiences who'll expect a lot of these features in their games. It does change the atmosphere somewhat as you're running away through these fiery ruins. Things do feel a lot less scary than they did in older titles. Rarely is there an instant kill to Abe when stuff goes wrong, and the camera lets us see what's coming up ahead instead of us worrying what the next screen will hold. I enjoyed this, but I can see how some old heads will say this ruins the atmosphere. It's clear they wanted a more different cinematic approach to this game compared to the old ones, and while that invites comparison, I would implore you to play this game first before passing judgment, even if you get it on sale. I personally like the new direction, even if it didn't feel like I was playing one of the old games. It's just a completely different kind of experience. With a reimagining as their goal, I can see why they went in that direction to distance the titles. This first section serves as a tutorial of sorts to the movement in the game. You've got sections like this where we're just avoiding fire, and parts where we have to actively put it out. The Mudokons are currently being besieged by Mullock's forces, and we feel that desperation as we get shot at or they start doing bombing runs on us, forcing us to change directions. We learn a fun property of the Soulstorm brew the Mudokons drink is that it's highly flammable, allowing us to spread fire to burn down obstacles or even burn enemies much later on. I felt the puzzle parts of the game were heavily improved by this inventory system, and the throwing for that matter. Much later we'll see some examples where we have a lot of choice in how we solve the game, rather than set paths to kind of do or die. Abe climbs through the wreckage of the caves as we see his fellow Mudokons running in their hundreds in the background. Our main objective is to meet back up with them and herd them towards safety. Most of the level goes fairly simply until we're told to run by the disembodied voice of the shaman, and we get a bit of actual mild difficulty landing a few jumps to not fall into a spiky pit like I did. A couple of sligs in the background call out they've got a 2319, a reference to Monsters Inc, which gave me a little giggle. We're told to save ourselves or we'll never be able to save the others as we get out alive, routed from our pals. In the cutscene that follows, Abe finds the Mudokon who is carrying the glowing artifact.
You know me?
He says soon the whole of Oddworld will know who Abe is, and that he will save all the Mudokons. They're apparently already dying, our followers. Apparently they don't know, none of us know. Something's fishy because everyone seemed pretty alive and partying when we last looked. There's a lot of prophecies in this game, in the series as a whole, and when this Mudokon dies and tells us to find the Keeper, it makes me worry we've encountered another one. Abe unwraps the glowing package, but we don't actually get a look at what's in it as we hear the others come under fire and we flee the cave to help them. Abe's already quite upset that he's led his followers into danger and caused the death of this single Mudokon, even if indirectly. Before the next level, we actually get to see Mullock and his forces in pursuit on a giant Rupture Farms air blimp. He's having a bit of a giggle about the Mudokons burning down their own hideout before the Sligs began to attack. Mullock needs to deal with Abe before his investors come for his head, so unless he manages to catch him or bring his head in, nobody's going to believe that Abe even exists.
Bad Quarma for burning down my farm. Okay, first we whack that blue.
We cut back to Abe having escaped the hideout, wanting to reunite with his fellow Mudokons so they can escape together. Of course, we've got Mullock's blimp flying in and out of the background across this level. We're on the outskirts of the Monsiac lines here, the holy caves for the Mudokon people, and Mullock has posted up guards to try and catch us. We need to make use of Abe's ability to possess things to not only activate some switches, but to eventually use some of the Sligs against each other. Until that point, we're going to rely on stealth. The background for these levels are a big highlight in how the Abe games deliver some of the atmosphere. We're trekking around these huge open mountain structures and the temple ruins set around them. Now, the dynamic camera here takes a step backwards, I feel, from the stage screen system of the old games, as they have to work this around the whole level being visible at all times, mostly by blocking off some of the background with bits of scenery. Now this removes a lot of space they could use to showcase the Monsiac lines a little bit further, but it's only really noticeable when making a direct comparison between these games and the old ones. Abe has never been a big combatant, but in this game we've actually got a variety of tools to use against the Sligs hounding us. For one, the brew we used in the last level is built up to be a bit of an incendiary weapon, allowing us to turn campfires into deadly traps. We can also use tape, a collectible item, to tie up unconscious Sligs to take them out of the level entirely. I really like the amount of choice we were given in solving the different segments of each level, and it's a massive plus to Soulstorm that the other games just don't have. Like, here I choose to tie up one Slig and light another on fire, but it's more than suitable for me to ignore the others rather than taking risks. This comes at the cost of losing resources I could loot off them, but I'm also avoiding a fight and maybe not spending as many resources to take them out. Speaking of fights, we get introduced to possession as a weapon. Now, as long as there's no possession blockers nearby, you can take over a Slig and use their equipped weapon as they could, and you can actually aim it in all the directions in this game. They can't jump, but they could use switches and climb certain poles not present in this section to move from different elevations. When you're done with them, just hold the trigger down and they'll blow up. Of course, Abe is completely vulnerable as this is occurring, which I'm sure won't ever turn out to be a hassle later. Continue through the Monsiac lines, treating it as a tutorial for possession until eventually we locate Alf, and he tells us that the rest of the Mudokons have made it out of this place. We can catch up with them a bit further up in the mountains. We see them running in the background behind us as we encounter some more hazards in our path. Slap mines. These things have been a staple in all of Abe's games, and to turn them off, you have to slap them when they're on green. Now, they have a really annoying pattern to them, and you'll most likely accidentally slap them on red and they'll blow up Abe along with themselves. Of course, they're quite useful for taking out your enemies too. It's really great seeing all the Mudokons run in the background as we advance, and it breaks things up a bit, but I'm still wondering about that lone one who said they're all dying. There's no time to ponder that though, as we see Alf and his pals under fire. We can't actually make it over to them just yet, but if we take care of the Slig shooting at them, they can advance and we can meet up with them in some nearby mines. This is obviously easier said than done, and works as the capstone to what we've learnt so far on this level, with us having to take out mines and work around using possession, with anti-possession devices cordoning off certain areas. Once you've got control of the Slig, shooting at them is a piece of pie though. The Mudokons run to safety and we advance further right, having to navigate through various caves to get closer to them. We do gain access to some stun mines which can be really useful if not a bit situational, and then the real crux of the mission is this weird protect the climbing Mudokon section where there's several checkpoints the things will pass through while guards go running to shoot them down. You're expected to possess some of the Sligs here to use them against the others, and it's a weird twist on the previous games having us escort the Mudokons one by one. In this case, there's 200 making the climb, and as any David Attenborough documentary will tell you, not all of them are going to make it. Alf tells us to follow the mine shafts to meet back up with them at a new zone, and we get this nice roundup of the level after we complete it, with badges showing how many things we've found, Mudokons we've saved, or Sligs we've killed. Now in each level you want to save at least 80% of the Mudokons to achieve good Quarma. We need a lot of that for later on in the game, though nothing stops you from just blasting through the levels and leaving your compatriots to die. Well, nothing yet anyway. Let's get ready for some fun escaping the mountains. We're immediately greeted by the major environmental hazard for this stage. It's Mullock and his cronies on their Rupture Farms airship. See, Mullock only really cares for taking Abe himself out to both clear his name and get a bit of revenge, and he believes he's cornered us. We've got sniper lasers to avoid and some initial armed Sligs to get around here. This can be easier said than done, as despite having an ample supply of stun mines, it's so easy to get greedy in this game. Mullock has more snipers trained on the canyon than you'd expect, and when you get past those he's got a fun habit of drop podding in Sligs and firing artillery at us, forcing us to stay on the move and only really pausing beneath stable roofs. The training wheels are off here, and it's more of what we learnt in the last section, just in some applied scenarios. I did like the abstract nature of the Mudokon ruins we're traipsing through here. I always felt they were rather Native American in design, but this feels more like Machu Picchu, and with our little head feathers like the Mudokons are more Mayan presenting here. Avoid the fires, the artillery, and save the one Mudokon present here to escape the blimp, funneling us deeper into the tunnels below the place. Mullock's blimp seems to audibly groan in frustration as we get away, a nice sound design choice. We arrive to the relative safety of Sorrow Valley, but we'll need to avoid the blimp's ever watchful gaze as we make our way through the Funicular, an abandoned mining complex, which, as the wiki points out, bears some resemblance to art from a shelf title, The Brutal Ballad of Fangus Clot. All these corrugated sheet buildings flanking the walls of something that's part quarry, part canyon. And this isn't the last breath of that shelf title we'll see in this game, and I'll get into much detail on that later. As we encroach in further, we see a sick Mudokon, saying the rest of the Mudokons here got sick, delusional and hungry in the first night they got free, and after going mad and eating some mould, his symptoms lessened, but his allies are still sick. Abe will need to craft an antidote to whatever is afflicting these Mudokons to help them escape, or they'll surely perish. In Exoddus, the game that Soulstorm's reimagining, we also had some sick Mudokons and had to unlock some spiritual powers to heal them, and so we can see this idea playing out in this title, just with a change from it being supernatural to us having to gather medicine from the mine shafts here. At least one of the Mudokons from Soulstorm Brewery knows why they're all sick, and we should keep an eye out for him too. The game does a cool design thing here by putting in front of our faces that we can use Mudokons to activate workstations. Now, we don't have any that can follow us and activate them yet, but it's a nice foreshadow and we know it's coming up. Head into the mines and discover how damn dark they are. I think even the dark areas in the old games had some outline we could follow, but the spaces here are super dark. You don't really know where you're going. They're ripe with hidden little secrets, and of course potentially pitfalls and enemies. Abe can either use his chi orb to scout ahead, which makes noise so I rarely do it, throw flares, or just tough out the darkness. The machines in here are powered by Fataline, that's with a PH, and the loop for pretty much all these mines is going in, finding an antidote ingredient and turning on the Fataline generator to advance. Through each section there's wires going to and from it, and it becomes clear this seemingly open section is actually quite linear. Dive into a cave with the warning of
screams and the screeches of fleeches,
and we realise the folks who had escaped here probably weren't from our original group. The seeds of Abe's revolt of Rupture Farms are spreading through the rumour mill and other Mudokons are escaping. In this cave we'll find Slogs sleeping and we'll wake them up by doing anything bar pressing the sneak button. I think at this point in the game I was expecting fleechers like the guy said, but you know, we had them at this point in Exoddus, but no dice, just angry puppers. For the most part we just have to avoid them or sneak past them, there's no charging them into mines or off ledges just yet. Something I imagine a lot of people who've played this game before may echo that there are a couple of problems that stand out as major. It, by nature as a reimagining of an old game, will draw a lot of comparisons to Exoddus, and while they've cut a lot of the things that were fun from that fan favourite of the series, you'll find no scrabs, no paramites, and fleeches. They kinda come later, but why not where they were mentioned? The sentiment on Reddit is that the level design has taken a hit too, leading to the second problem, some repetition. We'll see this as we advance, and you can tell a lot went into this game, and I want to stress I had a very positive time playing it. But for certain levels and segments of them, it feels like they're just copied and tweaked around the game. The mines aren't too exciting with a similar loop for each cave, and the biggest suspects of this copy pasting I'll point out when they come up. To make a long section short, Abe goes through various tunnels and collects the different ingredients for the mysterious Mudokon illness: moongrass, paramold, moss, sleech guano, even though we don't see any sleeches, and metal bat venom. Then we go give it to one of the Mudokons here.
Here you go. Try drinking this. How do you feel? Anything? I feel I feel great! I think you've done it, Abe! You found the antidote! Can you get up? I think so. Then let's go. There's still others that need help.
Abe can now lead Mudokons to safety, and this will form the backbone of most of the game. They can be directed in various ways to either follow or wait, and we can even equip them with throwables to aid us in combat. But This is normally too risky to actually consider doing, the AI just get mulched. Abe scores good Quarma by leading his pals to bird portals and their safety. You don't have to do this, but if you fail to rescue enough, we're locked out of some of the endings, and it's like playing Pokemon to not capture the Pokemon. It's the whole point of the game, and it adds a bit of challenge to each of the puzzles and stealth sections. For instance here, Abe can navigate past these traps with ease. We've got a double jump and an actual survival instinct, but these lemmings following him need to be instructed like we're an orchestral conductor, or they'll be dead. And then you'll probably top yourself to reset the segment and try again. The checkpoints are actually quite useful for that, and you'll find yourself failing a trap and resetting it to learn a little bit more each time. Now once the mines are finished, we take an enormous minecart deeper into the valley and we start the next level, this time with our antidote already in our loadout. We can see here I only rescued 19 out of the 24 Mudokons, and so I'll have to come back here later to get the full set and net the good Quarma for the stage. Our next level has a simple objective: leave for the train station. Our pals had specified to us when we next meet we need to hijack a train to bring it along for the ride. Let's use this little fairground binocular set to get a look at the stage, and oh boy, that's a lot of armed guards. And those ones up there are flying too. Looks like we're going to have some fun leading our pals to safety. We advance towards similar corrugated roof buildings, and we encounter the Mudokon who was present at Soulstorm Brewery. Well, his corpse anyway. We've got a cassette tape, but no actual way to play one just yet, but don't worry, we will get one. As soon as we try to fly up, we encounter some flying sligs and use possession to get them to take each other out. Then it's into a mine tunnel to rescue some Mudokons, and there's some sleeping hounds near a bird portal we'll need to get rid of. It's clear on hindsight we're meant to use this door apparatus here below to do it, positioning the Mudokons on pressure plates above. For some reason, past me was being an exceptionally smooth brain and died to it several times. Save them and get out, and then we're on a moving platform where we need to use possession to survive an encounter with more flying sligs. There's a lot of more combat in this game than its predecessors, but it does make for quite a fun section. Faff about too much and Abe will get taken out by the sligs. The mines themselves don't tell too many stories, but have many sections where we're controlling flying sligs. It might as well be the flying slig level. Again, really fun, but not too much to cover for a story video. This place seems to be leading us to a fat station. I imagine an obese gasoline place. When we actually leave the zone and have successfully navigated out of Sorrow Valley, it turns out the fat station is a train station, and we'll be infiltrating it to steal a train and get out with our conspirators. As much as I'd said the backgrounds weren't a strong point in this game, the ones here are beautiful, reminding me a lot of the Monsiac lines from previous games. It's like we're in some redwood forest with all this lovely scenery and ancient structures nestled in around the industrial sites built upon it. We even get some nice peaks at later stages of the level, which are done quite right here. They're obscure enough there's still some mystery, but open enough that they look really cool. We're also introduced to places Abe can hide. When you're in smoke, nothing can detect you, so you can just stand around all you want. We use these exhaust spouts to not only tank our lung capacity, but also to hide from snipers that might shoot at us. All while the fat station leers in the background. This one section with snipers as we approach some Fataline tanks looks especially cool. When we get inside, things get a bit more typical Oddworld, with the background being more mysterious machinery and pipes. Now we all know this is some sort of fuel apparatus, but it's suitably large and uncanny enough to give a sense of unease. This doesn't look like a fun place to work, and with sligs patrolling, we're forced to hide in lockers to get around them. Now unfortunately, things start to get a bit samey again, as all the interiors look fairly indistinguishable. I get they're all Fataline tankers, but besides slight changes to their layout, there's just varying degrees of use lockers to hide from sligs, rinse and repeat. It's definitely a more stealthy level, and they even give us a way to throw down our own smoke screens, giving you a little bit of choice on how you sneak through here. The greeter enemies are especially creepy too, just rolling canisters with these big grins on them. Designed initially to be self-promoting vending machines, these things were retrofitted to become a security measure against any suckers sneaking about the place. They're super loud and will most likely take out a few Mudokons on their first encounter. The level shines with some of the stealth gameplay, showing how tactical Abe and your Mudokons can be, with us making good use of these smoke pods to weasel around some quite vertical sections crawling with sligs. Again, you can't possess enemies if there's anti-possession orbs around, and this level does a lot to be a bit of a stealth puzzler. It later becomes a straight puzzler, as we have to avoid all sorts of rough industrial machinery to get our Mudokons to safety. This sort of thing is a staple in the Abe games. The machinery is absolutely lethal to us and its true purpose is unknown, just spinning axles and smashing pistons with a sole intent of hurting you and your pals. You have to escort some Mudokons through 3 full stages of this too. In fact, this game loves its rule of 3s, or 4s, or 5s, with a lot of challenges being repeated a few times in each section with some additions made to them. Climb some ladders, avoiding some axles to reach a lever, then lead the Mudokons through some pistons, rinse and repeat. Eventually, with most of our powers saved, we can jump onto a moving train to quite comedic effect. The series was known for its dark humour, and we've not seen too much of this just yet. I'm struggling to quantify it for you, the viewer, but it feels like they made an Oddworld game without actually having that Oddworld spirit there. They added a lot of cool features and snipped back a load of beloved ones, identity defining ones too, like the reduced comedy elements or getting rid of a load of the creatures. I guess this comes with the business of a reimagining, but they've turned an apple into an orange here, I think. Still an enjoyable fruit, but a completely different breed. We do get some of our rationed humour in the introduction to the next level, with Mullock and his lieutenant following Abe on their blimp. He's getting away, but they know he's going to be passing the Slig Barracks as it's the next stop on the train line. The dialogue between Mullock and the Slig here is quite funny. The Slig keeps prodding him, accidentally, and you can just see him getting visibly angrier and angrier until the payoff here.
Little harsh, maybe, boss. I mean, I know you've been working your whole life to retire on one of those mega luxury air yachts and all, and I noticed Abe guy burned that dream to smithereens. But maybe we clean this all up and you can still afford one of them economy models. You know, you buy it used off of E-Crappy.
Get us to Slig Barracks. Do it!
Of course, boss. I'm trying till I'm dying. We're gonna bring this puppy home. We are...
Speaking of Sligs, did you know, according to the manual for Abe's Odyssey, they have room temperature IQs. They're originally swamp creatures, legless, but the Gluckons found them and negotiated a deal where they'd give the creatures robotic legs if they worked for them. The Gluckons are pretty good recruiters, enslaving not one but 2 species and actually pitting them against each other. They seem to have more freedom than the Mudokons though, being granted wages, better jobs and, well, firearms. They might just be easy to manipulate though, who knows. Anyway, back to the train heist. We're here to hijack the train, to take it to the old trellis and meet up with Alf and the gang. It's a really cool level, the trains in this game having Gluckon faces and being suspended above the air. It feels suitably Oddworld with a little mix of Mad Max there. The desert terrain of the plains of Mudos in the background and the danger below of us turning into a heap of Mudokon flavoured jelly. It's nice to know we're just heading left to right as well. The individual train platforms having the most made out of them in this level. In Carriage 1, we free a load of Mudokon workers and find a fire extinguisher on the walkway of the next carriage, allowing us to not only spread fires but to fight them as well. The game holds your hand with this to start with, not opening an emergency door until you've extinguished every flame. We get rock candy too, a hard treat for the Mudokons but a very useful throwing weapon for either hitting Sligs or smashing fuse boxes. In the past few games we've had grenades and rocks, so it's nice to get a bit of variety there. You need to hit most Sligs 3 times in quick succession to knock one out, and be careful to do this or they'll throw something much worse back at us. Not much to reveal story wise as we go through like Billy the Kid freeing Mudokons and knocking out Sligs as we go. There's no massive dangers until we get closer to the front where we get another bit of content made for Fangus Clot, the Slig Mommer. A police suppression unit that is essentially an armoured crawler that shoots missiles at us. We can't really attack it head on given we're throwing hard candies and it's got a riot shield, but there is an unfortunately exposed mains wire beneath it that if we can land a bottle of brew on, we can spread the fire there and it should cause a happy little accident for us. Of course, in practice, that means we need to dodge missiles as we scuttle closer and closer to the thing, actually having to rely on these missiles to smash crates in our way. The carriage before it becoming a symphony of flames as we approach. Though enough spam throwing and we can take the thing out to the horrid screeching of its driver. It's a cool boss for this level. The Slig on the announcer for the train is shouting that someone needs to stop us before we reach the money cart. So this must be transporting a load of moolah for the Gluckans, along with some workers of course. When we do make it to the front, we pull the emergency brake, and I like to think the game imagines we subdued all the Sligs aboard, otherwise they'd just shoot us to death. A little in-game cutscene shows the train pulling up at one of the stations on the line, and when we look down, it seems the Mudokons we left somehow got trapped in the caves beneath. We'll need to rescue them before we can get moving. This next section is where some of the repetitive nature of the puzzles can be showcased fully. Now, I like this game, I had fun with it, but it wouldn't be fair to everyone who played it that I don't try to remain somewhat impartial. We head down into the caves below the old trellis to free the Mudokons there, taking the best part of probably 10 minutes of this level max. We see them running beneath the level towards some housing pens, and do you remember the section where we pulled a lever and had to protect the Mudokons climbing in the background? Well, we have to do that again, not once but 3 separate times. The idea here is that you can give the 4 Mudokons you've rescued on the foreground weapons to use to assist you, but their AI was so damn screwy they had more chance of getting killed than providing any real support. No, we're on our own here, and with the possession tech flying around, we'll need to use all the traps and all the craftable variants of the bouncy candy to their limits to progress through with at least 80% of the Mudokons alive. Let's look at me's past attempts at Pen 1. I pulled the lever just to scope out the section and where the guards could come from. In this case, it's the bottom 2 corners and the top left. I had enough fizzy pop to throw at the enemies that I could tie up the bottom 2 in time. That didn't go as quick as I'd expect, and in that time, the top guard took out half of my Mudokons. And after dealing with him, more guards on the bottom took out the rest. I ended up just eating some bullets to retry the section.
I do love these chips.
In my next attempt, I brought the Mudokons with me to fight, equipping them with some crafted candies that should instantly incapacitate the guards. I tried to set 2 in the top left and 2 in the bottom right. My soldiers at the top instantly got took out by a guard, and the ones in the bottom right wasted a load of their shots after the guard was already incapacitated. 101 Mudokons had made it to safety by this point, but I just used return by death again. 3rd time's lucky, right? Maybe I'm just bad at this. Set 2 guys at the top somewhere, they're less likely to get shot. Put some stun mines down by the poles where the guards will climb into firing range, and equip the fizzy pop as I pull the lever. Guard 1 comes out and gets knocked out by the mine. Good. He's bound and gagged. Guard 2 follows a similar fate. I then use the brew to light fires where the guards will pop out as my 2 soldiers at the top waste all their shots on an unconscious guard. With 2 poles out of use, I just have 1 to manually cover. All of the Mudokons escape, and I can call my little followers over to safety. That took me 15 minutes in game and exhausted a load of my resources. A fun, tactical section, I just didn't expect 2 more to follow. Without having learned from my mistakes in the next section, I stick 2 Mudokons behind one of the guard poles and 2 above the one on the right. The 2 by the poles get knocked out, and the 2 on the right shoot like stormtroopers. Seeing too many Mudokons dying, I use return by death again. I load up the Mudokons with insta-kill candies, and of course they waste most of them on unconscious Sligs. I then accidentally light myself on fire, taking a Slig out. To cut a long story short, by the end of all 3 sections, my soldiers had all gone, but I saved 225 climbing Mudokons, carrying me over that Quarma threshold. My sanity in tatters after the constant repeats. This won't be the last time a section like this comes up, but where it's placed here in Soulstorm, I was actually quite happy with the tactical challenge. It shows Abe's more than just a slouch, he's a leader, but it will overstay its welcome later on. The train gets going, and then we're on a full pre-rendered cutscene with Alf & Co.
Abe, I don't know how you did it, but unbelievable.
I tell you, he knows how to drive a train.
The Mudokons are on the train and are grateful for the help. Turns out our driver swiped some train manuals years ago and has learnt how to drive one from reading them all these years in captivity. We set off and reveal the bundle we were given by the Mudokon who'd escaped Necrum, this guy. It turns out it's a map of the area and there's a glowing amulet with it, some sort of winged insect trapped in the amber. We share the news that our followers have been dying, but Abe assumes this meant the Mudokons are dying because they're getting caught leaving factories. We also share that we encountered sick Mudokons at the mines, but Abe doesn't connect the two. We're told to find the Keeper, and when we announce that, the bug shines some light on the map, right on Necrum, a mining operation based upon a site of importance for the Mudokons. We'll add that to our to-do list. We reveal an old tape we were given by yet another Mudokon as we're approaching Slig Barracks. Alf brings up we can hit 2 birds with 1 stone here. We need to disable a comms tower there to stop the rest of the train stops knowing we're coming, and we can play our tape in the comm station as well, leading to our next objective. The Slig Barracks was an area in Exoddus 2, and you can imagine what we're going to encounter right as we hop off the train. The background isn't exactly encouraging. We've got a giant bundle of 45 Mudokons to rescue here too, 36 if you're being stingy and just want to achieve good Quarma. Turns out the Sligs have a radio playing here as we venture into the barracks. This place is all rusty sheet metal and Slig lockers, and we can hear a Slig giving an account on a conspiracy theory about Abe smashing Rupture Farms.
So far, that's what it's looking like. To be more accurate, it looks like he didn't just burn down that farm of his, he also killed over 300 of the poor mugs working for him.
The rest of the Gluckons just believe it was Mullock doing an insurance scam. I like these little radio scenes, but the voice acting for it seemed a bit weird compared to the regular voice work. Like they pulled in some guys off the street. I actually did some digging here, and I found out why the voices sound stranger and more human. It's because they did pull in a load of guys off the street. Well, special guest content creators to do some of the voice work on these radio shows. And there's some big names here too. I didn't even catch Lewis Brinley from Blue Zephos when I first played the game, or Jim Sterling, but they're in there. Most of the voice acting in this game is done by Lorne Lanning, and these cameos were probably really interesting if you're an active follower of some of these channels, but they do stand out as missing that Slig charm. One of the ones later in the game has them mispronouncing the Mudokons' names, which is either an oversight or a really clever in-joke that this creature doesn't care enough about the slaves to get their name right.
Does a more beautiful friendship exist than that between the Mudokons and the Gluckons?
I've got no strong feelings about these, besides they don't sound like Sligs, Gluckons or Vikers, but I imagine a lot of players do on either end of the spectrum, so it's worth pointing out. Anyway, back to the barracks. A lot of this segment is us digging through lockers to get resources for crafting, and it can take quite a while, but you've got to do it to be equipped for some of these sections. I can't tell if this locker diving is optional or necessary. Like I could probably make this window here without using a smoke bomb, but it does make it so much easier when I've got one. When we first encounter Mudokons, it's at the top of this tower section full of Sligs and some of those classic Oddworld mystery pipes. We need to take out the Sligs to lead these guys to safety, but we don't have enough tape to subdue them all. Luckily this game's fairly generous with its checkpoints. It's a rinse-repeat scenario to take out the Sligs, lower down your Mudokons to eventually get them to a portal. When we head out, we can see this barracks looking more like a set of trenches. Tents in the background that I can assume are either Mudokon or Slig housing, sandbags and barbed wire covering rather rickety structures just bolted onto pipes. When we head left, we can see a few rough traps designed to take our followers out. Machine gun wielding Sligs in the background and mines our Mudokons won't be able to jump over. I found the best approach was to manually take out the mines, make your Mudokons wait, so we could just run our dudes across. They also introduced tinfoil hat wearing Sligs we can't possess. Take the aggro from the gunners and run the Mudokons to the checkpoint now it's clear. We then have to babysit them as we take out more Sligs blocking our path. This level is pretty much exactly what you'd expect on the tin. Tons of mines, Sligs and hazards involving munitions. It felt the closest to the old games and was probably one of my favourite levels. When we get into the underbelly of the barracks, the backgrounds are even more odd. These pipes stretching into unknowable depths, windows with no real purpose as we're so far underground, and those terrifyingly loud greeters to get in our way. Nothing much of note story-wise happens until we find some Mudokons actually working. We need to get to the background to stop them, so a security detail will come down from the comm tower, and we can hitch the elevator back up. Of course, this place is swarming with Sligs, and to make things worse, pretty much any loud noise will set off all the alarms here, bringing tons more with them. Luckily, we can use a combination of Fizzy Pop and knockoff Mentos to create some IEDs to throw at the Sligs down here. Dispatch the Sligs here using a combination of those weapons and possession to board the elevator out with our new Mudokon pals. We have a cannon on this elevator that doesn't have its mechanics explained too well, so I'm going to explain them here. It will throw anything we've got equipped in our hands, just with some added oomph behind it. That means if we're holding any taped candies, it can one-shot Sligs. I didn't realise this, and so got caught out a few times not having anything equipped and therefore being unable to shoot. Just make the Mudokons crouch down, equip something scary, help even throw a smoke bomb down as it will travel with the elevator, and then pray a stray shot doesn't take out your followers. A successful elevator ride will look something like this. Thanks to my return by death, I know this guy is going to appear first, then one behind him. There's enough stun time on the cannon to make these flying Sligs not worth shooting at after you hit them once, and then you can make it out and oh. The tracker in the bottom left is for Mudokons, and the fact 2 orange figures are there. That means I've left 2 guys waiting back way before the elevator. Well, looks like they're not getting rescued. The next area is actually the comms tower, and we finally get a nugget of story. Abe turns off the tower, though I'm not sure why the Sligs can't just flick the switches back on. Perhaps they need the Mudokons that were working to keep the comms array active. We find an old screen that we can plug the cassette into to find out about Project Soulstorm. The brewmaster on the screen has the typical evil scientist accent.
Greetings, wise investors of esteemed Magog Cartel. What I propose to you today is the ultimate employee performance and job retainment solution. For you. He's been researching Mudokon addiction limits, and it turns out Soulstorm Brew, the stuff all the Mudokons have been drinking from birth, keeps them functioning like happy little workers. If they try to escape, within a few hours they'll die from withdrawals. No whistleblowers, no meeting union reps, no PR nightmares. We've discovered what our old friend was talking about when he said our followers were dying. The brew is what's killing them, in a twist on the original theme of Exoddus' take on the brew. Abe runs back to the train through a convenient shortcut to share the bad news with Alf. Alf is speaking first when we get there, pointing out all the weird pipes we've seen in the background in most levels. It's revealed these pipes link to Soulstorm Brewery and pump the brew to every factory in Mudos, so the problem is much more widespread than we'd think. Alf is really dumb, not realising we're not dying from withdrawals because our groups had brews this whole time. There was even a load more on the train. We've made an antidote previously, but only in small doses, and so it's not enough for everyone on the continent. Rumours have been spreading of our uprising, leading to many Mudokons attempting their own, which is going to result in their brew-driven deaths. Abe's only lead to solving this problem is to find this mysterious keeper character. It turns out our next stop is Necrum Mines, and we're not too far away. Hopefully, if they have some answers, we can keep casualties to a minimum. We cut to Mullock, aware these Mudokons should be dying from brew withdrawals, but we've not seen it happen with Abe's cohort, so he believes the brew isn't working, and the Gluckons have been lied to and scammed by the brewmaster. We cut to another Gluckon, Mr. Morga, who's been trying to reach the brewmaster too. He serves to show us the comm systems are all down. He also doesn't believe that Mullock would burn down his own farm, and the brew is probably failing to do what it was designed to. Morga owns Necrum Mines, a place where they've been digging up bones for secret use in the brew. Now, in the old game, this was confirmed to be Mudokon bones from a burial site, but we don't get that confirmation here. It could be anyone's femur.
Would Mullock really burn his own farm down? Or is the brew failing us?
The train goes underground to drop us off at Necrum Mines. The place is eerily quiet, and all we can see is various towers stretching off into the depths of Necrum. Abe is going to have to get past security to get deeper into the mines. There's only 32 Mudokons to save in this section and less Sligs out in the open. Instead, there's greeters and some mechanical spotlights attached to anti-possession orbs. We need to stop a load of Mudokons from working to open an elevator deeper into the mines, instantly spawning in some flying Sligs. Luckily, there's a smoke vent here we can hide in, and we can just sneak around the Sligs to get deeper. In the next section, we see a variation of the controller Slig puzzle, as we need one to pull a lever for us to advance further in. I quite liked Necrum Mines. In the old games though, they had introduced Mudokons that were blind in the mines, their eyes sewn shut so they couldn't see they were digging Mudokon bones up, and they didn't follow you around as you'd expect, obviously because they were blind. Though there's no Mudokons like that in Soulstorm, which I think was a bit of a missed opportunity. We do get a load of mine-themed machines to skulk around though, big drills like you'd expect. There's one example where they meanly put a slap mine on one that you're forced to deal with before being able to lead any Mudokons to safety. In fact, most of this level is leading Mudokons whilst avoiding drills that will give them. Later on in the level, they take that to the maximum, with Abe having to go through some horrible monkey bar sections where you have to really time your jumps well, or this happens. The level following this is Deep Necrum, where it's the mines but a higher level of security. We need to go to the deepest point to hit some Mudokon catacombs, as that's where we'd expect to find the Keeper. Really, it's more of the same, avoiding sligs and mining equipment, including one horribly frustrating section. I say I was frustrated, but through no fault of the designers, where we need to follow a spinning saw blade to avoid snipers in the background. This took me out several times. The boss of this level is a giant flamethrower apparatus where we need to go below it and then follow it, to not only activate some power switches but also lead some Mudokons to safety. An honourable mention for boss trap encounters is this giant screen-sized drill we need to avoid, where between two world-sized drills of doom is a bunch of mines and a spinning scanner that if we trip will get mulched by a load of sligs. Things don't pick up again story-wise until we're in the catacombs proper, firstly having to use a flashlight to go insanely deep, lower than the Glucken's drilling efforts have reached yet, coming to this massive spiral staircase with thousands of these honeycomb-filled pods that have some sort of creatures in them. I assumed Mudokons, but we really can't see into them clearly enough. This place is insanely large. When we reach the bottom, the bug on our neck tells us the Keeper is here, and at the bottom of this honeycomb structure is this big amber lake. A rickety bridge carved with old Mudokon markings is all Abe sees as a blind Mudokon skulks around quite creepily in the background. When we come face to face with it, it stares a little bit too long before grabbing us and checking to see if it's Abe. It's a good thing we didn't cut out the stitch lips earlier. The bug in our necklace also waves hello to it, looking weirdly zen, like it's completed its task of delivering us here. Apparently, the bugs always knew we'd come, and none of this makes any sense. What is this place? Why are there thousands of keepers meditating in the honeycombs? How does this thing know our name, and what secrets are they keeping down here?
We keep the oldest things, Abe.
Oh, thanks for the answer. Turns out they're keeping secrets of crimes down here, hidden from history. The Keepers keep the true history of the Mudokons, something we as a player won't outright be learning just yet. Abe spots a carving that looks a lot like himself with the stitch lips, and it becomes clear we've got a supernatural destiny thing going on here, just as the shaman said in the beginning. Abe wants to know what the Keepers know, and we're told we'll get that information once we descend into the depths beneath this chamber and retrieve the stone of the Fragon's Eye. Turns out the depths are a bit spooky too.
Where you can return with the eye and receive the branding, so you can see.
When we return with the eye, we'll receive a branding similar to when we got the blessing of the creatures in Odyssey. But the Keeper first kicks us down and gives us some sage advice.
You can return with the eye, Abe. As long as you remember, they don't like the light.
They don't like the light? Who doesn't like the light? Are we going to see some actual creatures for once? Oh boy, I've been waiting for this one. Finally a good old-fashioned tomb raid, just like the good old days. Yeehaw, time to run it. Oh. We'll avoid that. Now, what the hell are those things behind the walls? It's not a true Abe game without some sort of nest or temple to nosy through. The depths in this case are home to sleeches, and as one of the tooltips tells us, they don't like light. These things are entirely separate to the fleeches that they emulate from Exoddus. We can ward off sleeches using torches or flares, the torch having a charge meter before it needs to replenish itself, and the flares disappearing after a while on the ground and obviously being limited. Think of the depths as a sleech-themed temple. They're quite weird looking, but will attack just how the fleeches did, swarming you in groups, jumping between floors, but they don't swallow us like the fleeches did. This whole area is partially illuminated by amber crystals that will switch on after we pass them. To make things more challenging, it's riddled with traps that are obscured by the darkness, making quite a fun and challenging area. I can imagine opinions amongst players will be mixed about this whole section, but it was my cup of tea. The traps, while they felt slightly unfair, they're actually quite easy to spot when you're not panicking. It felt like the devs giving us the finger, goading us on to explore, and they're placed in a few places where the checkpoints won't help you. When I said they felt unfair, they do while you're playing it, but in retrospect, they're completely fair. I was just being blind. We do enter a big sanctum at one point, and this area looks like one of the old zones. Weird Mudokon architecture spread about. The whole having to activate bells to open doors, the flintlocks, this big thing with a trial here, it's harkening back to what we do in the old Abe games. There's no Mudokons to rescue here, and it's an area I'll gloss over to get back to a point of story significance. One thing that is worth mentioning is the gauntlet after we grab the Fragon's Eye. It's a gemstone of sorts. It made me feel like we're running through a Sleech nest. They pour out of the walls, and we have to jump across these pillars that start to lower when you land on them. Falling spiky orbs make this harder than it sounds. After those, we have to run across a large walkway with more spiky orbs swinging in and out of the background. At one point, the ceiling then starts to drop on us, and if you're not careful, you can get stuck here. Eventually though, we see the golden amber of the Keeper's Sanctum, and the walls take on that honeycomb shape. Numerous Mudokon figures can be seen frozen in that amber, and it makes me wonder what happened here. There's a Mudokon queen, so maybe this could have been her nest once upon a time, if the queen's like a queen bee.
Whoa.
When we get out, the Keeper is nowhere to be seen. Well, not by Abe anyway, they're hiding in the background. They tell us to go to the centre of the lake to find ourselves. It'll be the only way we will know. We head to the statue that looks like Abe, these carved idols of stitch-lipped Mudokons hanging there, and we see a slot to put the Fragon's Eye in. This whole scene reeks of some sort of spiritual alien tech, with some sort of electromagnetism dragging in Abe's hands. The pillars around us erupt with glowing energy, some even floating in place, defying all laws of physics the Glukkon machinery was following in the past. There's something much older and much more powerful at work here. The Keeper speaks aloud to us saying, "Forgive us, Abe, it was the only way." The Keeper cells glowing in unison with the machinery, pulsing as all of the energy coalesces into this brand across Abe's torso. He's left a gibbering wreck by this, and rightly so. The Keeper speaks aloud that he has beholden such a terrible truth. It's a lot for a heart to bear. Abe replying, "Why would they? How could they?" He's absorbed the memory of the Mudokon's past, though as a player we have no clue what he's been told. He's instructed to taint the brew of his antidote.
For what good is a poison that's tainted with its cure?
The entirety of what he saw will not be found in this game. Lorne has left the players with some answers they'll want questioning in a sequel. Though, we'll get some of those answers towards the ending of this game at least. Abe wakes up in Necrum. Alarms have been raised and all the Mudokons have been thrown in prison cells. We need to get them out. One thing that's come from this brand is the power of the Shrykle. If we can pass Mudokons through special portals, we'll unlock a devastating one-time use ability that will take out anything hazardous in the immediate area. One thing more troubling is when we look through the viewfinder to see what the rest of the level will involve. It's one of those massive defend the Mudokons while they climb in the background sections, only this time they're not going through one holding pen, they're not going through 3, they're going through like 8 of them. These sections seem to be the main complaint online when you trawl through the player feedback. The sections simply aren't too enjoyable to most. In a lot of it, there'll be a point where you can possess a Slig and save your pals, and that seems to be the best bits. But sometimes it feels like pot luck if you'll make your way through, especially at points where you can't possess anyone. You're meant to use your Mudokons to help you, but their AI is so scuffed they're more of a hindrance than anything. They love to waste precious resources that we could have just thrown ourselves. Sometimes you get lucky and the Slig AI bugs out, effectively skipping a section, but other times it can softlock you out of going forward, like here when there was meant to always be a Slig available to possess to press this button. But you can see he's bugged in the top corner, so I had to reset the checkpoint to continue. Sometimes it's a guessing game on where you should stand or where you should make best use of your resources, and most of my feelings about the escape as a level are negative, unfortunately. I get the sentiment that this is an enjoyable game, I had a lot of fun with it, but it just doesn't feel like an Oddworld game at these points. I get they might want that to be the case to reboot the franchise, but a lot of old players may find themselves jaded here. Hell, bugs like that would jade anyone. Now, once we get everyone aboard the train, things do pick up again. Alf tells us we're getting low on brews, and whatever our plan is, we need to speed up on it. Apparently the situation is worse than we thought. Everything the Mudokons know was lies. They weren't always slaves, and they were once something much, much more. Now, you won't learn much about it in this game, but if you check some of the old links, and I mean links to pages that have disappeared from the internet now, you'll see the history of the Mudokons, that they and the Glukkons once coexisted, until eventually there was some sort of conflict over the Mudokons claiming themselves to be the chosen race, partially because the moon has their paw print on it. The Glukkons didn't quite like this, and after abandoning alchemy they turned to machinery, and ended up enslaving the Mudokons and turning into the industrialists we know today. There's not a lot out there about the history of the Mudokons, and I imagine the next game will, expand this quite a lot. But we can imagine at one point they were comparable to the Glukkons, and maybe they had some bad habits themselves. Now, the game does bring some humour in when Alf asks if the Keeper was hot.
She? Was she hot? Elf, no, she was the oldest thing I've ever seen.
She said we need to taint the brew with our antidote, but we only have small doses. Luckily, the suggestion flies that if we go to FeeCo Depot, we can get the ingredients we'll need to make the antidote in bulk doses. It's our next stop anyway. Mullock, in his role as our background antagonist, sees we tore up Necrum, and his plan is to rout us off at FeeCo Depot. I always found the interactions with Mullock and his Slig entertaining, if a bit hidden for a supposed antagonist. Our main threat currently is dying from brew withdrawal. Mullock and the Sligs feel very tame in this game, and not much of a danger. Hell, the other Glukkons don't even think Abe exists. I think they missed a trick here. FeeCo Depot is run by CEO Aslik, A-S-L-I-K. He's in his executive napping hour when he's interrupted by a Slig on the line, and they bring up the Abe conspiracy theories, but he doesn't want to hear any of it. The brewmaster at Soulstorm also gets a feature being called about the rumours, and he doesn't want to hear about it either. So currently Abe's about to ransack FeeCo, and the Glukkons, as stupid as they're portrayed to be, perhaps as lazy as they're portrayed to be in this game, are all against Mullock. We're lacking any real build-up or any foils to Abe. The depot as a level looks super busy. We need to make our way to the storage yard to find the ingredients for a bulk cure. This involves getting a delivery car to pass through 3 different zones, with us unlocking its advance at each one. A fun little twist on things so far is there are a Slig here interested in where that car goes, so we need to knock them out or they're going to keep stopping the car from advancing. We can slap some rubber bands on our hard candies to make them bounce through a little vent to advance. Each zone has the usual puzzles you'd come to expect by this point, so we'll be on full gloss unless something interesting comes up. Like this one section where we need to get workers past trains coming through that will obviously take out anything they hit. This gets slightly more complicated when we need to do the same but with snipers added to the mix. We switched the tracks for the train to go to the depot yard, and it was at this point I'd realised I'd missed a ton of Mudokons from the start of this stage, but we're going to probably have to come back anyway. The depot yard is a mass of storage containers, looking more like a junkyard than anything else, and I'm sure Aslik has some sort of filing system for all these crates. Some Mudokons who are working here have kindly marked the container we need in their attempt to support the mythical Abe and his rebellion. We get another content creator here, and I quite liked his delivery, even if he's not sounding like a Slig.
Soon you might have to pay more to feed your family. That's right, prices of all the usual food staples you've come to know and love are set to skyrocket after the destruction of Rupture Farms by the greedy CEO, Moloch, currently on the run from authorities.
Hello.
The main trouble in this level comes in the later stages when we're riding a heavy crate picking device and have to dodge bombs and sniper lasers whilst on a fixed rail. We climb up a heavy Glukkon crane, seeing the FeeCo Depot building in the background, flanked by the mountains of Budos, and as soon as we're on the crane we get ambushed by Sligs from both sides. Using our return by death, we can anticipate this now, throwing a Molotov behind us so that we've only got aggressors coming from the front. Sligs won't crossfire for love nor money. Then we have to make sure our package gets down to the train itself, and we collect a variety of items from the top we'll use to craft munitions, and then we sit atop the storage crates as they slowly descend. We've got flying Sligs with machine guns and missile launchers spawning in all around us, probably attempting to stop a robbery in progress. You can possess a few of them, but as you get to the lower levels, the anti-possession stuff comes in, and you'll have to rely on Abe's Major League pitching arm to dispatch the Sligs. The crate gets loaded onto the train and we're at our first major stop in the story, one of the endings. If you failed to rescue 80% of the Mudokons in less than 11 of the previous levels, but more than 7 of them, the next scene will play out. Alpha's using the brews in place of fuel and we're being chased by Mullock's forces from behind. Alf questions if we have a plan as we cut to the brewmaster. He thinks the conspiracy theories about the brew working all stem from Mullock, and it turns out 2 Gluckons have arrived by airship to the brewery demanding answers from the brewmaster. He tells them they can wait and curses Mullock's name. We cut back to the train under heavy fire by the Sligs with Alf desperately trying to get some speed. He starts banging on the door expecting an answer from Abe about the plan, and it looks really dire. This is actually the intro cutscene to the game. Abe is muttering about what to do and he unveils the little bug in the amulet. Turns out our bad Quarma flows into it and actually causes it to pass on. It's too much for a creature to bear. We go to carry more brews to the engine, crying that our Quarma killed the creature.
No more brews, you'll never make it inside that brewery.
I killed it.
But you did your best, right, Abe?
My Quarma, it killed me.
And Abe trips, covering the room in brew as a spark flies out. Luckily, the other Mudokon grabs it, but then a second spark lights the room in flames, instantly killing Alf and causing quite a painful death for Abe, with the fire extinguisher stuck in the back room. The flaming train crashes into the brewery, destroying it and sealing the fate for all of the Mudokons on Mudos. They're going to die from withdrawals. Mullock's convinced he's going to be blamed for this as the fire spreads through the pipelines to all the other factories on the continent. He plans to take his Slig to the Yemens to escape the threat of conviction and a firing squad. When the Slig makes an offhand comment, he ends up getting killed, and I imagine without a pilot the blimp goes crash.
Oh man, now you'll never get that luxury airship you've been dreaming of all your life. Not even a crappy one. But boss, I didn't mean to say no, boss, no!
So for our worst ending, everyone dies. Probably most of the denizens of the continent with the way that fire's spreading. A suitably dark ending we'd come to expect from the bad endings in the series. If we'd failed to rescue 80% of the Mudokons in less than 7 of the levels, we get a similar ending told to us in newspaper clippings. But, and this is a big but, we use our return by death to go back. We unlocked level select and discovered we only need a few more missions to have good Quarma to unlock the next section of the game. Starting with a hijack, I went back and made sure to rescue all the Mudokons missing. There were some carriages I never bothered to open. Fight Slig Mommet, go and steal the train. Then I went back to FeeCo Depot. There was a secret area at the start of the level hiding my missing Mudokons. Free them, finish the level as normal, and then we can see how the cutscene was meant to play out. Our good Quarma, get that? Good Quarma, not bad Quarma, fills the bug. It energises Abe with the power of the Shrikle and we blast all the Sligs attacking the train. Then as the brewery mounts their forces to stop us, bolts of lightning stop them from shutting the doors and we take out all the forces meaning to give us a rough welcome. The power ends right as we get to a stop gate. Abe then needs to hop off and manually deal with getting the train to the brewery's mixing machine. That includes invoking the Shrikle as soon as we start the stage. Boom baby, yeah.
Boom! 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 Boom!
The brewery itself is just a dimension of endless vats and extraction devices. We'll need to move between these to reach all the stop gates to get our train further forward. Turns out the brewmaster is twisted and has been using Mudokon tears as an ingredient for the brew, extracting them forcibly through some horrid torture devices. I don't know what's worse here, the horrible tear extraction of the Mudokons, or the Mudokons sat there cleaning the floors, knowing what goes into this brew but still drinking it of their own accord. We get some of these floor cleaners out by being really techy with a couple of smoke emitters. There's actually a blind spot here for the possession tech and we can take out both the Sligs by hand. There's a whopping 81 Mudokons to rescue on this stage and a large majority of them will come through these tier extractor sections. We need to stop the ones who are turning the extractor wheels and turn off the machines themselves. This will make the tortured ones pop out into the foreground like so. Then Slig guards will come from the elevators to investigate what's stopping the process. On the first screen they don't come, but on subsequent ones it's the main gimmick of the level. You'll do this many times. Sometimes the Sligs will come by elevator, or sometimes by pods on the foreground around you. I found the best tactic being to find somewhere to hide and possess them. If that's not possible, you can use the brew and flares to set up fire at their spawn points, and use other throwables to take out the flying sligs. I've seen a lot of complaints about this being a repetitive section online, but I did quite enjoy the combat puzzles when they didn't feel unfair, and so I got on quite well with it. It obviously does overstay its welcome after a while. This is genuinely the bulk of the level. As you'll see by my tracker here in the bottom left, those segments look identical, but I've gone through a number of them to rescue Mudokons. It's not the strongest level, especially given all the work to get it, but thematically you do feel like you're actually performing a rescue, instead of just picking up stragglers. They punctuate these sections with essentially danger runs of you having to open the stop gates, but to open them you have to pass a number of doggies and sligs and other traps to meet the train at the mixing room. When we get to the mixer, we can see Mullock flying by the brewery, and he can tell Abe's wrecking the place. He spots Morga and Aslik's limo blimps and comes up with the ingenious plan of sending his pilot down Solid Snake style to get him some more information on what's going on in the place. When he says the plan is easy, we get this little clapback by his Sliggy.
So that's the guy with no arms.
This next section is the big test of everything we've learnt so far. The final level and the capstone testing all of our knowledge and skill. There's 50 Mudokons here, but we'll be using the first set to help us connect our cargo to the mixer's feeder unit. It looks like a big Glukkon head, but is used to inject our cargo into the mixing apparatus. We set 4 Mudokons working by activating the work whistles near these pipes, and then jump on a pressure plate below a big spinny machine. We're told if the injector's interrupted too much, we'll be crushed by said spinny machine, so we need to use possession here to deal with the sligs arriving to arrest our Mudokon chums. I got weirdly lucky here where their AI bugged out, so they didn't want to climb up and bother me as long as I kept making enough noise to mess with them. Well, I thought I got lucky. Turns out this machine is tied to the sligs dying. There's no timer going on in the background, so I had to manipulate them into showing their faces. With them gone, we can rescue all of the Mudokons here and take a rather ominous elevator down to the mixer. And, well, look at this. The Shepherd's Tone, the giant cavern filled with nothing but this colossal machine. This is ambience at its finest. We need to go through a gauntlet of turning on 5 different brewing pumps, one by one, each with its own unique puzzle or challenge. This one here is all about using these monkey bars to avoid fire and bombs flying around, for example. My favourite was this one with a colossal eye. There's sligs around we can't possess due to anti-possession orbs, and we can't chant to activate the apparatus while they're up. So we need to avoid or subdue the sligs while this eye will occasionally shoot lasers at us. You need to stand in front of the orbs so the machine itself will take them out, and it's a pretty unique puzzle as far as the game goes. In fact, this whole level is filled with these unique twists on previous puzzles or unique content, making it one of the most enjoyable levels by my standard. There's even a flying puzzle where we have to possess a slig floating around a spice grinder, and honestly this level's the best the game has to offer. I've got 0 complaints and found it really engaging. When all the pumps are active, we go into the belly of the beast as it were, the machine having a huge face that we enter, and we go onto a bit of a boss platform, and it feels like we're entering a living creature. The brewmaster is weirdly silent in the background as he watches. I don't know whether he was meant to have dialogue, I didn't look it up, but he was silent when I played. We have to activate this wheel in the middle 4 times, after which guards will drop and we need to shrike them, and bombs will float in we need to jump over. At one point, we even need to make 2 slig mommers face off against each other, a suitable boss fight as the antidote is added to the brew and instantly pumped out to all the factories plumbed up to the pipes, securing the freedom of our Mudokon pals. We've then qualified for the good ending. The slig spy comes in and witnesses Aslik and Morga coming to get answers from the brewmaster. It turns out they've been stiffing their sligs off bonuses, and Mullock manages to convince them to join his side for a fee. They then barge into the brewmaster's office and spray the Glukkons down. Mullock and the sligs then go into hiding in the Yamens to escape the law, with most of their involvement covered up by the Soulstorm massacre. Abe's train pulls over and the Mudokons camp out in front of the moon, realising they're no longer being chased by Mullock. They assume the Glukkons in their ignorance don't believe the Abe rumours and have blamed it all on Mullock himself. With him gone, nobody's chasing us anymore. Abe reveals all of the Mudokons share a mother, like a queen bee. She had left them and could be located at Nolibab, a Glukkon city. She's either working with them or captured, we don't know, and Abe doesn't imply that, that's just my inference. Abe wants answers on why she left the Mudokons and why he has stitch lips. I assume this will be the focus of the next game, as the bug starts to rattle in the amulet, hinting it knows a path forward, and with that, the game's over. If you rescued an obscene amount of Mudokons, you get an epilogue, which is just newspaper screens where we see the aftermath of Soulstorm. The Mudokons leave their factories and Mullock being blamed for the mess. So let's conclude and tie things up. In Oddworld Soulstorm, Abe's journey evolves, delving deeper into the themes of rebellion and survival within Mudos. There's expansion on Abe's story and a darker perspective than the original Exoddus, at the cost of some of the dark humour elements. The narrative explores the high cost of freedom, the weight of leadership, and the repercussions of corporate exploitation, especially if you end up with a bad ending, and the cost is most of the lives on the continent. Abe struggles with his role as a messiah character with it thrust upon him without him really asking for it, and this becomes more apparent in the later acts of the game. I think our foils here are more internal, with the group's motivation for survival leaving our antagonists of Mullock and the other Gluckons a bit underutilised and wishy-washy. Ultimately, Soulstorm does contribute to the ongoing saga of Oddworld and the Mudokons' relentless pursuit of liberation, even if it set us back slightly by replacing one game and knocking Munch out of the chronology. I think it's a fun enough game. I got to it after most of the bugs had been patched, and some areas do overstay their repetitive welcome, but there's enough meat on the bone to make it a fun game, and I'd recommend getting it on sale and having a gander. It takes a real different direction from the previous games, and that makes it questionable if it's a good Oddworld game, in the sense of the overall plot, atmosphere and story. They miss a trick slightly by removing a lot of the mechanics from previous titles, and even ones they reused in New and Tasty like the Elam or any of the other non-doggy creatures. I look forward to seeing what they cook up next, and hopefully they address some of these issues. There's been a lot of people speaking out online about it. There's a lot of potential here, and if they take their time on the next one, I think they can really crack the formula here. We're given a lot more questions than answers in this game about the history of the Mudokons and why the Queen left, and the fate of the Mudokons not in Abe's group is questionable at best. Did they escape their factories, or did they all get shot down? I imagine a lot of them die trying to escape their factories, but who knows. There you have it. There's the story for Soulstorm explained. Over and out, Smooth Brains.
And then whammo! Slig nuggets. That's great. I love Abe.